It's time to take a ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive with our co-hosts, Saunders and Zachary Smith.
Get in the van. It's time to take another ride on a Steelers Afternoon Drive. I'm Saunders. That is not Zachary Smith. That is Brendan Howe. Smitty is under the weather today. Texted me this morning, very apologetic, saying, hey, do you think there's any way you can find somebody? I'm like, I'll find somebody. And then I texted exactly one person, and Brendan is here. So welcome back to the Afternoon Drive. I think this may be the first time it's been me and you here on the show. We see a lot of each other. I think we should get along just fine. Welcome back to the Afternoon Drive.
Yeah, I think the last time I was on this was when you were on vacation. To New Jersey, so I was a little bit more nervous. Those two, but Zach kind of eased me into it. I'm not as funny as he is, but I'll try my best to fill his shoes today.
Smitty and I have a good thing going comedically. We may have a little far yesterday. I don't know. We'll leave that up to the audience. So big news today, of course, Mike Tomlin talking. That is until 30 minutes after Mike Tomlin was done talking, when the Cleveland Browns and Cincinnati Bengals just dropped a strange and sort of sad bomb on the AFC North, trading Joe Flacco from the Browns to the Bengals. I was actually sitting in the Steelers press conference room still like, what? And then it was hilarious because like a lot of people are like transcribing and have their headphones in or kind of in their own world. So I like one person after another be like, did you see? Holy crap. What? It's just a very unexpected thing that, like, I don't know. I think probably the shock value more significant than maybe the actual on-field impact of Joe Flacco getting traded within the division from the Browns to the Bengals.
Yeah, and it's funny because someone brought up a question during Tomlin's press conference about wanting to keep Joe Flacco out of the game on Sunday here, and then they're going to have to end up facing him on Thursday anyways. And right before we started here, I looked at Flacco's record against the Steelers, and I always thought it was better than it is. It's 11-11. It's a 500 record, but you'd never see those interdivision trades. It's like in season, I feel like. And the fact that the Browns are willing to help the Bengals a little bit, very confusing to me. I'm sure that was kind of your first reaction with being surprised that they're basically helping a division rival for a fifth-round pick. So,
yeah, I mean, if I thought something was benefiting a division rival and all I was getting was a fifth-round pick for it, I would just say no. Like that's easy. But the Browns, of course, are not really in contention for anything this year already, obviously. But also, like, I wonder how much this is just about the weird quarterback dynamic in Cleveland where they went to Dylan Gabriel, but Shedeur Sanders was still the third stringer behind Joe Flacco. His bizarre pantomime interview, non-interview about that. And I think what clearly feels to me like an ownership that was a lot more on board with the Shedeur Sanders selection than maybe the front office and the coaching staff were. Like, if you're not going to play Joe Flacco and you invested something in Shedeur Sanders, why are you holding him down? Like, you've already kind of punted on the season by the fact that you're playing Gabriel anyway. Like, what is the harm in letting Shedeur Sanders do his thing? So this definitely just feels like a punt for the Browns. But I went right back to that question too. Can't remember. It was Ashley Lotus from Channel 4 and Cassidy Wood from Channel 2 both sit right behind me. It was one of those that asked the question. I don't remember which one it was, about, hey, you said, against the Colts last year, you wanted to keep Flacco out of the game, keeping Andy Richardson on his feet. And Tomlin's answer was, well, that was because there are two really different players. Like, you spend all week preparing to have this athletic guy who you think you can fool, and you've prepared a bunch of strategic blitzes where you're not going to try to flush him from the pocket because he can outrun you anyway. You're just going to try to confuse what he's looking at. Now you got to go to a guy who you probably can't confuse and also can't run at all, and it just requires a very different defensive game plan. And then he said this year that doesn't really apply because he felt like the Browns aren't doing anything very different with Dylan Gabriel than they were doing with Flacco anyway. Of course, that all goes out the window the second he answers the question, because now I would say, yeah, you probably want to get Shedeur Sanders in if you're the Steelers, because obviously they don't think he's much of a player or they would have drafted him. I wonder how he would answer that question now, though. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, and the fact that, like, I wrote about it late last night with Derek Harmon. He was teammates with Gabriel at Oregon. He lauded Gabriel for his smarts and the way that he plays football intelligently. Today, Tomlin says that I think he said his processing speed is his superpower. 3 or 4 times it sounded like, because I'm sitting there listening to YouTube, the YouTube, whatever it's called, the stream. And I'm sitting here thinking now that you mentioned like getting Shedeur Sanders into the game, the entertainment value of that happening. Like I don't want to look past Dylan Gabriel, but the entertainment value of that happening, or if in a different kind of reality, Kenny Pickett is still on that team, and he's also going to. I don't know if we treat Kenny Pickett's name like Voldemort, like most of Steelers media and Twitter does, but not saying his name. But either way, it's going to be an interesting game. They're both rookies. If Shedeur Sanders does get in there, whether that be injury, poor play, the internet will blow up. And I've seen that firsthand with covering him, writing about him for different sites for college football over the past 6 months. He's someone that people care about. And if you're Dylan Gabriel, how comfortable are you like sitting there, knowing that someone that famous, that influential is kind of breathing down your back?
Not to mention, it's better. Like, he's a better player than Dylan Gabriel. I don't think there's any scout in the country that thought that Dylan Gabriel was a better player than Shedeur Sanders. Sanders is where he is in the Cleveland depth chart because of the way he handled his process and teams not trusting him to be a franchise quarterback because of the personality. But he's a better quarterback than Dylan Gabriel. So, yeah, I mean, Gabriel's absolutely looking over his shoulder, rightfully. This is, why you don't do things like draft 2 quarterbacks within 2 rounds of each other. But, thank you, Browns, for giving the rest of us content all the time. So Flacco not in this game. I kind of feel like will be, though. I mean, you don't trade for Joe Flacco just to keep him as Jake Browning's backup, right? Like, the expectation here is that the Bengals are going to start him maybe as soon as this week, but would think certainly next week against the Pittsburgh Steelers on Thursday Night Football.
Yeah, they said that right after they traded for him, it sounded from what people were reporting that they're planning on him start this Sunday. And when I think he's 41, 42 years old, there's nothing that he hasn't seen. So it can't be that hard for him to get up to speed. And it's definitely be interesting being able to talk to Mike Tomlin next week. Joe Flacco is going to come up for a second straight press conference, most likely, and hear what he has to say about his talent set.
Third straight, because he came up in the Vikings press conference when talking about, now this week and then next week. What does it say about the Cincinnati Bengals that the guy the Browns just benched, who had a 60 passer rating in 4 games and a 1-3 record, is now seen as a help or an improvement? Like, gosh, man, that was a team that was had a lot of high hopes after sort of threading the needle and finding a way to do the impossible, which people didn't think they'd be able to do, and keep both their receivers and Trey Hendrickson this offseason. And then it all went to hell anyway. Can Joe Flacco help them? Is he better than Jake Browning right now?
That's a good question. I feel at best he's even to Jake Browning. Like, Jake Browning did have those stretches with the Bengals whenever Joe Burrow was hurt, where he was able to come in and not be Joe Burrow, but he was able to kind of lead that offense and keep them somewhat steady, I guess. I feel like this is a bit of a last-ditch effort to get Flacco in there. We saw what he could do last year when he played for the Colts, and he came in, as Tomlin talked about, and kind of flipped that game on its head. I don't know. I feel like those 2 quarterbacks at best are on par with each other. I don't see how Flacco could be any better, especially as he's aging. He's been benched. I would kind of wonder what's going through his head now. He's probably happy to get another chance to start, but the way he's become a journeyman late in his career here, I think 4 or 5 different teams at this point after being with the Ravens. I know the Broncos. I think he played for the Jets at one point. Seems like a fever dream. He's kind of just there to play football, I guess.
The Eagles also in 2021. The funny thing about so Joe Flacco from the Philadelphia area played college football at Pitt and at Delaware, and has now played for the Ravens, the Jets, the Eagles, the Browns, the Colts, and now the Bengals. It's just like, okay, what teams can my parents drive to? Like, that's it, right? That's some of that one season in Denver. Everything else is just 6-7 hour drive from home. He now completes the circuit of the AFC North, having played in Pittsburgh in college. Now he's got the other 3 down as a pro. But are we buying the idea that Joe Flacco can at least like get the Bengals to a point where there's a season for Joe Burrow to salvage when he gets back?
I don't see that happening. No, and I honestly think out of the options, I think the other names that were floated were Jameis Winston and Russell Wilson. We're familiar with Russell Wilson. We saw Jameis Winston in Cleveland last year. If the Bengals wanted to have more fun, I would have gone with Jameis Winston. Just how unpredictable he is as both a character and a football player. Like I think in one game last year, he threw for nearly 500 yards, but he also threw for 3 interceptions and 4 touchdowns. Like, that's fun to watch. And then we saw Russell Wilson last year, who still seems like a very, I don't want to say consistent quarterback. He got benched in New York, but he seems like a guy who can kind of steady a team, come in, and he was effective early on for the Steelers. He provides that spark maybe a little bit early, and then it faded away late. I honestly don't think Joe Flacco would have been the best option. I would have liked to see, just being that we're going to cover them here in a few weeks, and then again this season, Jameis Winston be out on the field just for that entertainment value of what he brings there.
And look at the Bengals' schedule here. This is the part of it where I say I absolutely do not buy that Flacco is going to save anything. Here's the next. So let's say they could maybe get Burrow back for week 16, right? The last 3 games. Here's the Bengals' schedule between now and then. At Packers, Steelers, Jets, and Bears. Okay, 2 winnable games there. Steelers, Patriots, Ravens, Bills, Patriots. Even with Burrow, like a little bit above 500 would be pretty good for that stretch. Like even with Burrow, you'd be thinking, well, they could maybe split with the Steelers and the Ravens and probably split the Bills and the Packers. And maybe they go 5-3 in that stretch, even with Burrow. That just gets them to 1 game over 500. That just gets them to a prayer. Now their stretch run is easier: Miami, Arizona, Cleveland. But I don't think Flacco can get them to that. I mean, I don't see it. Even if he cleans up against the worst teams, I don't see how Flacco helps them against the Packers. I don't see how Flacco helps them against the Steelers. I really don't see how he helps them against the Ravens or the Bills. I just think this is rapidly trending toward a lost season for the Bengals, and I'm not sure that this. I agree. I would have gone with Russ. At least he can run a little bit. That's the other thing. Is like you have a terrible offensive line that has already gotten your 20-year younger starting quarterback hurt once. Why do you think you're going to be able to protect Joe Flacco? Like, why not get somebody that can run a little bit? At least is able to protect himself. I think it's more likely that Joe Flacco gets knocked out between now and Burrow's return than him having the Bengals in position to make a move for the playoffs when he gets back.
Yeah, and then you end up with Jake Browning, and you lose a 5th-round pick that maybe you could have amounted to something more.
And you help the Browns. Like, neither team should want to do this. Like, it just even if the price was more, even if you had to pay a 4th to the Giants for Wilson or Winston, wouldn't that be, trading anything in the division is icky, especially a quarterback in season. Like, I don't know. I don't like any of this for either team. It does make sense for the Browns to just get rid of Flacco, but not to the Bengals. Like, find somebody else.
This is probably putting you on the spot a little bit, but I like thinking of teams trading quarterbacks within the division. I think the last one I can remember that was actually noteworthy was when Philadelphia traded Donovan McNabb to the Washington, at the time, Redskins. Like, he was at the tail end of his career at that point anyway. So Philadelphia knew what they're getting rid of, and they kind of.
I mean, that was more like that was an off-season move too. Like, certainly a lot easier to stomach then than in the middle of the season. I have a hard time remembering any. Drew Bledsoe is probably the one. You got to go all the way back to that like not only was traded within the division, but was like traded within the division with the intention of starting and sort of, somewhat still in the prime of his career. I can't remember. I want to say back in the 90s, maybe did the Falcons and Saints trade quarterbacks? I'd have to do some more research there. Bledsoe's the one to me that kind of, but Donovan McNabb was a good answer too. Like you said, he was. I mean, not that Flacco isn't at the tail end of his career, but
I thought his career was done like 6 or 7 years ago, and somehow he resurged. Like he said he was on the couch whenever the Browns signed him a few years ago, and I think that playoff run that he made with them, that kind of flash in the pan where he goes. I think they went to Houston, he throws 2 interceptions that were really costly. Like that bought him another 3 to 4 years in the league. Like just that little stretch there.
It is fascinating to me about the like psychology of when players, especially like players like quarterbacks and kickers, where like certainly the injury risk and the wear and tear you're putting on your body exists, but not to the same level as like, I mean, I can't tell you how many old Steelers I talk to. It's like guys that can barely move that are in their 50s and 60s. And it's like, oh, you can totally see why at 40, you know, a guy like Aaron Smith, who was just with the Steelers not that long ago, like, oh yeah, you can totally see why he decided to hang it up. You look at his quality of life, like not even that long after he's retired, and you're like, man, like here's a guy who's, you know, like clearly suffering from his football career. Quarterback, not really like that, right? Like you just decide how long you want to try to do it, and it's fascinating to me, like which guys are like, yeah, I'm going every snap I can. I'm gonna play until I'm dead or until no one will have me, and which ones are like, you know what, never mind, I'm ready to hang it up. I feel like it is so much like an insight into their psyche, but you just really got to be like a little bit sick in the head to want to still be playing in the NFL at 40 plus years old. Like there's something wrong with you, and like I'm not saying that like I'm not taking shots. I'm just saying like I think a lot of competitors are like that, but you really have to be pretty unique to want to keep going out there. I mean, I'm 41 myself. I'm ready to quit men's league hockey, let alone play like at the highest level of physical sport in the country. You definitely got to be built different.
I ran
and like a little bit nuts. You just got to be a little bit nuts, I think.
I ran on the treadmill last night. I woke up, my legs are sore. So
yeah, my ankle was popping and cracking as I was walking to the press conference today because I played last night. It's like, you idiot.
Yeah, and there are guys like Aaron Rodgers has been asked. I think whenever he came to Pittsburgh, he was asked like multiple times, like, "Why are you still doing this? What are you here for?" And for him, it seems more of life enjoyment. Like he wants that one last year, and he said he wants to have fun. He wants to enjoy it. Which a 3-1 record, the way the division is breaking right now, it seems he has no reason not to enjoy it. But I feel obviously Aaron Rodgers at 41 is a lot different than where Joe Flacco is at 41. So I think that it's also very interesting. That it'd be interesting to dive into more players' heads after they retire. Like, at what point did you realize, like, you woke up and you're like, this isn't for me. Like, I'm done with this.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. All right, let's talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers. We got a lot from Mike Tomlin today that I want to kind of run down. Let's start with an injury update. Kind of what I feel like we knew, but expecting Joey Porter Jr., Alex Highsmith, and Jalen Warren to return this week. Porter has been out since week 1 with a hamstring strain. Highsmith with a high ankle sprain has been out the last 2 games, and then and really barely played against the Seahawks in week 2. And then Warren had the knee injury pop up after week 3, missed the Vikings game sort of unexpectedly. So, I mean, I think Warren was maybe still a little bit up in the air. We were pretty sure the other guys were going to play. Left the door open for Jalen Ramsey and Calvin Austin, although I am somewhat skeptical that either of those guys are going to play. And then talked about the what's next in those situations. And I think there's been some spirited debate in the Steelers community about the future of wide receiver Roman Wilson. And there were 2 names that Mike Tomlin gave when asked who replaces Calvin Austin. One was Roman Wilson. One was Scotty Miller. What are your thoughts on where they're going to go at wide receiver here with Austin seemingly likely out at least this week? And as we've been saying, if you miss this week with 1 practice next week, probably going to be 2 weeks. Do we really think this is the time they're going to hand a significant amount of snaps and targets to Roman Wilson?
Tomlin also mentioned the fact that the reason Wilson hasn't been on the field is because of the multiple tight end sets that they've put out there. Calvin Anderson, I think it was maybe you that asked that question when I was listening earlier about him being on the field more and how he's earned some more time on the field. Even I think as an eligible tight end last 2 weeks ago against the Vikings. But Yeah, I think this will finally be the chance for Roman Wilson to be able to step up. Calvin Austin kind of gave a glimpse into what Tomlin was going to say today when Austin talked yesterday. And he said that Roman is going to come in. He's going to show who he is when he finally gets that shot. There's not a better time than now. This has to be the time for him. Scotty Miller is a proven guy too, as Tomlin kind of touched upon. He won a Super Bowl. He's caught passes from Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers. We saw in training camp what Roman Wilson could do when given the chance, in practice anyways. And we saw early on in preseason, whenever he catches a few intermediate balls down the middle, kind of opens up the offense a little bit. It's kind of felt like it's a matter of trust between him and Aaron. And we've talked before that they've talked before. You've seen Aaron kind of get upset with him at times during training camp. But yeah, this is the week. This is the chance for Roman Wilson. He's only had one catch in his career for 7 yards. It wasn't one that he could be excited about being down against the Seahawks. That game was kind of decided at that point. But this will be the week. If Steelers are going to see Roman Wilson break out or kind of show who he is, there's not a better one.
Yeah, and I think the reason that you heard two names there is that and also you mentioned we saw him look good in training camp. We saw him look good in the preseason. Mostly when Calvin Austin was injured, right? Mostly when he was given opportunities to work on the inside. And I really think he can be a good player in those scenarios. He was at Michigan, and it's reasonable to expect him to be that at the NFL level. I think he can be a good blocker. He's shown his physicality. I can't remember who it was in the Jets in week 1. He was blocking, and he got right in some safety's face, face mask to face mask, and was like, that's what you want to see out of Roman Wilson. You want the well-roundedness of his game to show. He's not the world's most crisp route runner. Just like get open enough and then be tough, right? That's what he has to bring to the table. But I also am unsure as to how often he's going to be able to defeat press coverage on the outside. He was not asked to do that very much in Michigan. He's not done that well in his limited stretch where he's been playing outside and moving Austin to the inside, and the times the Steelers have played 11 personnel this year. And I think that's where Scotty Miller comes in, because even though he's only 5'9", if you look at Scotty Miller's career, more outside than inside. He has been the rare kind of small guy that finds a way to do it. So I think you're going to see really Scotty Miller taking on the Roman Wilson role while Roman Wilson takes on the Calvin Austin role. I think Wilson will have some success. I think he's going to do pretty well. I wonder what happens when Austin comes back and it goes away. I'm sure people are going to be ripping their hair out because it doesn't seem like this is a long-term absence for Calvin Austin. And I would expect that he's just the better of the two players. Like the things that Roman Wilson is good at, Calvin Austin is better at. And that makes it really hard for them to find playing time for him.
Yeah. And Roman is also and I'm sure that this has come with him not being able to produce at the level that he'd like or that he'd kind of hoped at this point in his career. When you talk to him, he's not someone that has many words. And when he does have words, it's kind of just, I got to get better. I got to improve in this way. He's always talking about that. And Mike DeFabo went up and talked to him yesterday, one of our fellow beat reporters. And I went up to him after I said, did Roman have anything to say? He goes, not much. I was like, every time I've talked to Roman, he's kind of just been very close to the vest. And you saw it as an Ohio State fan. I saw whenever he was talking about Marvin Harrison Jr. and the Louis Vuitton bags and all that. I want to see that side of Roman Wilson. You mentioned he gets in a defensive back's face and starts yelling. The one we're used to seeing is so much more subdued than that. Especially in the locker room, he's a quiet guy. I would love to see that kind of unfold and see him kind of open up more in that way and become aggressive and talkative.
Yeah, I agree with that. The other piece of sort of offensive usage that Tomlin addressed is the tight end room, where Darnell Washington and Connor Hayward outsnapped both Jonnu Smith and Pat Freiermuth, and it reversed their usual roles and sort of what everyone thought, and was asked if he thought that's going to continue. And he basically said yes, especially against 4-3 teams. He doesn't think it's reasonable to expect guys like Pat Freiermuth, Jonnu Smith to be blocking the Myles Garretts of the world. And while that's true, not everybody else plays their 300-pound tight end 50 snaps a game. Of course, very few people have a 300-pound tight end. What do you make of this situation with the Steelers tight ends? And it seems like people are very upset that Freiermuth and Smith didn't play very much in this game, even though what they were doing was working quite well.
Yeah. Well, Frymouth was a lot more a part of the offense last year. I remember writing over and over as the Steelers traded Pickens away, like writing who was leading the team in receptions, who was the leading returner in reception yards, and he had a big part in the offense last year. I think a lot of what people are confused about is they haven't seen him as much, and that kind of gives some insight as to why. You mentioned a lot of teams don't have a 300-pound tight end. A lot of teams don't have a 300-pound tight end that can also catch the ball and dunk it over a goalpost. So as long as what's being on the field is working, I don't see where there's too much of a problem with it. Especially, you mentioned Myles Garrett being on one of those edges there. I would rather have, if I was Mike Tomlin, a guy who can help block Myles Garrett, who is one of the best defenders in the league, rather than someone that can go out and catch a pass like Frymouth. Like I think that makes a lot of sense, especially going into this week, maybe more than others.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, the idea of playing Darnell Washington more has lots of things that go beyond the abilities of the tight ends. Like, their offensive line has not played very well. Their tackles specifically are not very good. They're certainly not reliable, right? Like both have had bad games where they've sort of made plays on their side of the ball mildly uncompetitive, right? So they need the help. You have a 41-year-old quarterback who cannot take the hits and can't get out of the way. And so there's a lot to it that honestly, I feel like they probably should have been playing Washington more earlier. I feel like that was a very common sense adjustment that Arthur Smith made going into the Vikings game. It doesn't surprise me that they're going to continue it. Look, there isn't a single player on the Steelers offense that is going to have the production that they quote unquote should have, because they're not a good offense. Like they're not going to be a good offense. They don't have a good offensive line. They don't have a lot of talent anywhere other than tight end, which is the one place. But like that's the problem, right? Your three tight ends that are all very good don't keep your offense on the field long enough to get the ball to three tight ends. Like, you need to have a highly developed offense to have the ball long enough to be able to spread it around to that many playmakers. And they just don't have them. They don't have that. They're not going to. Aaron isn't that good of a quarterback at 41. The line is still struggling. Certainly far from dominant. They have one good wide receiver, and the second one who kind of is at least good at some things is hurt. Like, yeah, this is not going to be a good offense, and they're going to have to find a way to make it work week to week. That may mean that some weeks Pat Frymouth and Johnny Smith just aren't part of it. Some weeks Kenny Gainwell isn't part of it. Maybe some weeks that Roman Wilson is a big part of it. Caleb Johnson becomes a part of it. Like, I feel like most of this, like the Steelers are 3-1. Their offense is dead even in the league. That is as good as they can be. I feel like the frustration here is fantasy people and people who lost their parlay because Pat Frymouth didn't get a catch. And I'm like, it's working. It's going to be different every week. It doesn't matter how you divide your not enough touches to go around amongst the people that are out there.
Yeah.
If you win.
I was listening earlier. Stephen A. Smith had this clip on Twitter where he chose his 5 best teams in the league, and the Lions are number 1 with the offense that they've had since that week 1 loss that they had. And just hearing that, like the thought that went through my head was like, it seems that Lions offense is, I don't want to say in a different league than the Steelers, but it's much different in terms of being able to put points on the board. And we've seen stretches 10 years ago where the Steelers were that team that could go out and score and score and score. What kind of surprised me about, and you mentioned the tackles not being the greatest. Someone asked Mike earlier if he'd said anything to Broderick about his first matchup with Myles Garrett with moving to left tackle. And he said they haven't really talked, and there's not going to be talking about that because Broderick is professional and he knows what he's up against. Did that kind of surprise you at all with like him saying that they don't even address it? And he might just be saying that, but if they don't address that, talking to Broderick or even just like, I think that the way it was posed was, do you motivate him? Do you challenge him? Did that surprise you that that there might not be any conversations behind the scenes there?
Yeah, it was my question to Tomlin, and I, in full transparency, was fishing there. It's bad form to ask Mike Tomlin a question that you don't know the answer to, and that you don't really have like I don't have a point to make there. It was just, hey, anything you want to hand me here? And so I'm not surprised I didn't get anything.
Yeah.
But I'll also say I'm not taking that answer at face value. But he frequently does not share the details of his motivational tactics and or maybe that's it. Maybe it's the you don't talk to the pitcher during a no-hitter. Maybe you only get in his head until he screws up. Maybe you don't feel like you need to. I think the Steelers have done fairly well with Myles Garrett over the years. Not saying they've done. Let me say that a different way. I feel like comparatively, the Steelers have done pretty well with Myles Garrett over the years. Nobody does well with Myles Garrett. I think they've done better than most. I think they probably have a reasonable game plan for how to attack it. And I think coaching that game plan is different. Like it's not like you're going to treat this like it's any other week when in terms of the amount of time and attention that you're going to give in meetings and planning in the specific personnel that is in the game and the specific assignments that are being given out solely because of 95. Like that is not going to be just like any other week. So maybe the wording of the question was bad. I'm sure they're going to do some things very differently. Does that include a rah-rah motivational speech? I don't know. But it certainly wouldn't hurt.
Yeah, the only time you get a glimpse of Mike Tomlin's motivational tactics is when there's an accidental Facebook Live in the locker room. It's been a while.
We got some of that on Hard Knocks last year, and the occasional like mic'd up clips that we see. But yeah, he doesn't give up that stuff very often, so I wasn't really expecting him to.
Yeah, I figured I'd ask. I like what you say there. Like, don't talk to a pitcher during a no hitter. Like, maybe the message is being that there's no message, if that makes sense. Like,
yeah,
he wants Broderick to kind of hear that and take ownership or take responsibility. And after I talked to Broderick, I think it was when they beat New England, when we went up to Foxborough, it seemed like he thought he was doing a better job at that point and he was getting more comfortable. Like we talked coming into the season about how big of a change that is, where if you put a right tackle, left tackle on Madden, it's like, okay, they have a 99 overall or 86 overall, and they're going to say this. And in real life, it doesn't quite work that way, where that is a completely different flip, and you see kind of the inner workings of that as the season goes on.
Just did some quick research here. Of the teams that Myles Garrett has played more than 5 times, only 2 does he have less than a sack per game, and that is the Steelers and the Houston Texans. So there you go.
Yeah, Micah Parsons is coming up here in a few weeks too, so that'll be an interesting.
Trey Hendrickson next Thursday.
Yeah.
So yeah, the although he doesn't always does he play on the other side. I think so. Yeah, I think he faced Hendrickson last year. Now I don't know if he's still over there, but that won't be new, at least. No, they say Hendricks is playing them right. I think he has faced him in the past though. So, a couple other things from Tomlin. Just, kind of brief stuff here. Wrapping up. Or do we want to get to the move? Actually, let's get to the move. The Steelers did sign. We knew they were signing Raheem Blackshear. Releasing Juwan Bentley from the practice squad seemed to catch some people off guard. It's a little surprising to me. What are your thoughts about this move here?
Yeah, we noticed that when he wasn't at practice yesterday. Confused as what that might have been. Nick Farabaugh, who everyone's familiar with, actually thought he might have gotten signed to another team off the practice squad. I think you wrote about whenever they signed Raheem Blackshear yesterday, so you know a lot more about him. But does that speak more, like letting Bentley go, does that speak more to the trust that they're developing in the linebackers? Like, obviously Patrick Quinn is there. Obviously Peyton Wilson kind of got ragged on earlier in the season, but he's come along, especially that tackle against the Vikings that people said was a bit of a game-saving play with the minute that he took off the clock there. Is that more showing trust in those linebackers? Like, hey, we don't need this guy behind you. What would you say?
Yeah, I think the improved play of Peyton Wilson, definitely. And just Cole Holcomb was a total question mark at the beginning of the year. Like how well he was going to do if pressed into service, and then it looks pretty good. So yeah, I think that's part of it. Awfully thin though there. Carson Bruner, the 5th guy, and then kind of nobody else. So little surprising in that regard, I would say. Not surprised at all they want to find another running back. Trey Sermon has used 2 of his 3 practice squad elevations, so they're going to have to make a move there one way or the other next week, basically, if they want to keep doing that. And I think Blackshear's a better kickoff returner. So if that's all Sermon's doing when he's up, if he's not running, I think I'd much rather have Blackshear up. So I think that's an easy switch to make. So I understand the desire to bring him in. I'm a little surprised that they did it at the expense of Bentley, who I thought was one of their better practice squad players, and in a position they're not that deep.
Yeah. Like Sermon, like you said, he's only been into return kicks. Like there's to me a clear difference between Jalen Ward and Kenneth Gainwell, and then obviously they're going to want to bring Johnson along at some point. With like even though that miscue that he had and that Seattle loss, like they're going to want him to become a large part of the offense. And at that point, if you have a 4th running back that deep, who's a veteran, I don't really feel like he has a role going forward in the future of the team. Like I feel like it benefits the team more to kind of bring Johnson along and have Blackshear behind.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. All right, wrapping things up here. That went fast. It always does. Thank you for joining on short notice here. And Brendan, tell the people where they can find your work. Of course they know, but like just tell them anyway. And
I'm hoping they're starting to notice. Yeah.
Right.
By Brendan Howe on Twitter. I post our practice clips. I try to cut up some interviews when I have some time. And obviously on SteelersNow.com, I write as much as I can with kind of having my hand in different things. So yeah, Twitter and always on the site there.
There you go. And of course, you can find me, @Saunders_PGH on X, Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky. PGH Steelers Now, the site's account, SteelersNow.com. Go there and read the words. Sign up for SN Plus, and you get access to our subscribers-only live stream, which is coming up for the month of October. And all the best content from me, DB, Brendan, the rest of the Steelers Now team, and ad-free reading, which, let me tell you what, is a big deal. And anyone can like, subscribe, and hit that bell for notifications here on the YouTube channel. We are at 16,815 subscribers. Brendan, I'll give you, since you're the guest here, do you have a Steelers 15 in your head there? That's a pretty uncommon number.
I know Hines Ward wore it before he was 86, right?
His rookie card. If you're a collector, his rookie card is 15.
Yeah, I have. Sounds crazy, 15 to 20,000 football cards. So actually planning on going to like a show later in the week to look at some more. 15 is hard though. Can you think of any others that are 15? Like I can't think of quarterbacks.
Yeah, I've got one, and it's a real Willie Reed, who's a wide receiver and a kickoff returner in the early 2000s. And the only reason I remember him at all is that I went to the Orange Bowl where he played for Florida State, and it was a crazy like triple overtime game against Penn State. He returned a kickoff for a touchdown, and then the Steelers drafted him. So I always remember him. Cody White very recently, still with the Seahawks, still in the NFL, had it for a couple of years. And then you go way back, Mike Kruschek, 70s backup quarterback, had that crazy start in 1976 where he backed up Terry Bradshaw and went 6-0 to start his career. And then I think never made another start, or at least never made another start for the Steelers. I think that was it. So not the world's most prolific number there for the Black Gold. Of course, Benny Sco wearing it right now and doing a nice job of it. We didn't mention him in that wide receiver conversation. I think he'll be involved too, even though Mike Tomlin didn't mention his name.
Definitely.
That's it, folks. Thanks for watching, listening. If you're listening on an audio platform, make sure you leave us a 5-star review there, and you can subscribe, Spotify, Google, Apple, wherever you get your podcast. Until next time, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Taking another ride on a Steelers afternoon.